Tadi kau pilih apa itunya?
Satu menit lagi. Satu menit lagi. Oh ya Pak Tang, apakah slide nanti bisa kami arsipkan di repositori kampus?
Ya bisa.
Sekiranya kalau versi yang sekarang masih ada yang perlu dihapus, silakan ada waktu. Nanti kalau sudah final aman, silakan dikirim lewat Aci bisa.
Oke.
Ya. Oke, sekarang sudah jam 1. Kita mulai. Terima kasih Ibu dan Bapak sekalian yang sudah hadir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Selamat datang di seminar daring program studi teknik air tanah ITB pada hari Sabtu tanggal 14 Agustus 2021. Di ruangan ada Pak Zen Wen Tang, panggilannya Pak Tang. Jadi panggilannya Pak Tang ya Pak? Oke.
Ya Pak.
Ya, jadi panggilannya Pak Tang. Beliau ini adalah pakar bidang remediasi yang saat ini bekerja di Jacobs Engineering. Beliau berasal dari Malaysia. Hari ini akan menjelaskan berbagai hal tentang PFAS. Apa itu PFAS? Nanti kita ini sama-sama, kita ikuti sama-sama. Kemudian juga ada Bu Anggita Agustin. Beliau ini akan jadi moderator hari ini. Beliau juga bekerja di Jacobs Engineering. Jadi kita beruntung hari ini dapat menghadirkan wakil dari industri lingkungan, dalam hal ini Jacobs Engineering. Nah, nama saya Erwin Dasapta Erwin Irawan. Lengkapnya, saya sehari-hari mengajar di program magister di Teknik Air Tanah, juga program sarjana di Teknik Geologi. Saya mewakili Pak Rusmawan sebagai ketua program studi di program studi air tanah ini mengucapkan selamat datang. Terima kasih sudah hadir di waktu hari Sabtu ya. Mohon maaf memang acara-acara seperti ini waktunya akan ada di akhir minggu, hari Sabtu itu prime time-nya justru di hari Sabtu Pak Tang. Jadi agak unik memang di era pandemi ini. Ibu dan Bapak akan dapat memantau artikel ininya, slide-nya ini di website Air Tanah. Nanti tautannya akan kami sampaikan. Kemudian juga Ibu dan Bapak silahkan nanti mengajukan pertanyaan lewat chat, ya, karena seringkali pertanyaan itu pada saat kita ingin bertanya justru sudah hilang. Jadi silahkan Ibu dan Bapak ketika masih ingat ketik di kotak percakapan ya, chat box untuk kemudian diolah oleh Bu Anggita untuk disampaikan ke Pak Tang. Mudah-mudahan seminar ini bisa bermanfaat bagi Ibu dan Bapak sekalian. Hari ini ada perwakilan dari perguruan tinggi tentunya yang hadir. Kemudian ada juga dari, rasanya ini dari industri juga ada. Background peserta itu berkisar dari mahasiswa S1 Pak Tang sampai lulusan S3. Jadi sangat ini bervariasi. Mudah-mudahan bermanfaat dan Ibu dan Bapak silahkan kalau ada media sosial itu bisa menyebarluaskan informasi ini dengan men-tag. Kebetulan kalau Air Tanah itu tidak punya Instagram ya, punyanya Twitter yaitu @hydrogeoitb. Silakan di-tag. Oke, berikutnya silakan Bu Anggita Agustin sebagai moderator untuk memulai acara. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Erwin. Terima kasih semuanya yang sudah hadir. Karena sepertinya di dalam meeting ini ada beberapa orang yang bukan warga negara Indonesia, jadi saya mohon izin untuk berubah bahasanya menjadi bahasa Inggris. Gitu. Okay, let's start. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for finding time and visiting our webinar. Warm welcome to you all. And let me introduce myself. My name is Anggita. I am an alumnus of Teknik Air Tanah ITB from 2013 class. And now on, I'm working with Jacobs as environmental scientist. And also, I feel very privileged. And once again, I want to thank you to ITB, to all of the professors, the academics, to allow Jacobs to be a speaker for today's event. So, yes, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, before we proceed, as Pa Erwin said before, that I would love to inform to you again that if you have many questions, if you have any inquiries, you can type into the chat box, and I will read them all during the Q&A sessions that we will have later on after the presentations, of course. And also to keep the sounds very functional during the meeting, please mute yourself when you're not sharing. And I will also mute this meeting so we don't have any noise disturbance during the meeting. So yes, okay, that's all that for the introductions for this event. So okay, let further ado. We will have the presentation shortly, but please let me introduce you our speaker for today. So our speaker for today is the technical director of Jacobs. He is a geologist, and he had been handling the contaminated sites for over 16 years. And he is remediation specialist too. And please welcome Pak Zen Wen Tang. Over to you, Pak Tang.
Thank you, Anggita. Selamat siang and very good afternoon to all the ladies and gentlemen in this call. First of all, I would like to thank ITB for giving me this opportunity to present in this webinar. And I would also like to thank Anggita for arranging this. I will be presenting my materials in English. If you have any questions or if you need any translation, you can put in the chat, and then I'm sure Anggita will help you with it. So let's start. Okay, in Jacobs, before we begin, it is always a Jacobs culture to start with a culture of caring. So for today's culture of caring, I would like to share a little bit about our mental health. So mental health has been a growing concern since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and when the start of lockdowns. So many people had suffered mental stress due to loss of livelihood, loss of close ones, due to the pandemic and also prolonged lockdown and also many other reasons. Therefore, it's very important for us to take care of our mental health and those around us. In Jacobs, we have identified 5 ways to mental health well-being. So the first is be active. Continue with a healthy, active lifestyle at home by doing some simple workouts and exercises. Second is connect more with people around us, especially friends, family, colleagues, and even though it's just virtually, right? Number 3, we should continue to keep learning, continue to upgrade yourself, and increase your skills and knowledge. There's a lot of webinars like the one we're attending now. There are also online courses that we can attend. Take notice. Number 4, take notice. Stay alert on the conditions of people around you. Talk to them more, virtually, of course. And if they behave differently, try to find out and help them wherever you can, mentally or any other way that you can. And finally, learn to give emotional care to people around you, and also provide help to those who need whenever you can. Okay, let me just give just a little bit of background about myself. I am a geologist. I have a geological background through academic study. I graduated 17 years ago, and I've spent 16 years working in as a environmental geologist and working on environmental site characterization and remediation work in throughout Asia, including Indonesia as well. I am currently serving as the technical director for site characterization and remediation in Asia for Jacobs. I am also pursuing my postgraduate studies with the University of Malaya, doing research on contaminants in groundwater, which includes PFAS as well from landfill. Okay, so the agenda for today is, there are 6 agendas in total. First, we're going to talk about what is PFAS and where you can find them, the sources of PFAS. And then we will talk about how does PFAS transport from the source to the receptor. And then where are the regulations globally, and whether it's regulated in any of the Western countries, in the developed countries, and how we can assess and mitigate the risk for PFAS and PFAS situation in Indonesia at the moment, and how do we treat PFAS if there's any contamination. Right, I come to the first agenda. Where are PFAS and where can they be found? Okay, PFAS stands for per and fluoroalkyl substances. Okay, so they are the substance that's used to make Teflon, and also because of their oil repellent properties, water repellent properties, and also chemical resistant properties. Okay, so PFAS is stable it's recalcitrant, but it's mobile. That means it can move. It can transport in water. It's hydrophobic and it's also oleophobic. A science panel study of PFAS done in the US identified effects of PFAS on human health includes ulcerative colitis, high cholesterol, pregnancy-induced hypertension, thyroid disease, testicular cancer, and kidney cancer. So half-life of PFAS in humans is approximately 5.4 years for PFOS and 3.8 years for PFOA. So the research that was done in the US by the science panel is through gathering of information, through interviews and questionnaires, and collected blood samples for tens of thousands of people since 1980s until now. So among the thousands, I think a couple of years ago, they have identified about 1,700 PFAS substances. But up until this year, I think the number has grown to about 3,000. And out among the thousands of PFAS identified, 2 of them stood out as the most studied and potentially toxic to human. Okay, and they are perfluorooctane sulfonate, PFOS, and perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA. So these 2 substances, PFOS and PFOA, are already regulated under the Stockholm Convention and as POPs, persistent organic pollutants. So what are PFAS? Are they superheroes that can help us, or are they supervillains? Okay, there are a movie already being out many years ago, and it's called Dark Water. If you're interested in the movie, you can always go and watch it. It talks about the dangers of PFAS to the environment and to human health in the United States. Okay, where can we find PFAS? So PFAS is used in a lot of industries. Okay, examples are aerospace, outdoor apparel, automotive, electronics, oil and gas, chemical and pharma, buildings, semiconductors, healthcare, and military. So in short summary, PFAS, any industry that uses water repellent, oil repellent, and chemical resistant may have PFAS. So, and it's been around for quite a while. Okay, mostly on heat and chemical resistant materials. But PFAS also appears in our daily lives. Okay, the fluoropolymer coatings and products with oil and water repelling properties, such as clothing. We have raincoats. We also have sportswear that repel dust. We also have printings, logos, or any kind of graphics that was printed on our clothes that repels water. It may contain PFAS. Furniture, anything that repels dust, repels oil, repels water that is not genuine leather may contain PFAS. On our food packaging, fast food packaging, for example, doesn't stick oil to it. It also contains PFAS. We have heat-resistant and non-stick cooking surfaces, Teflon surfaces like our pans, our cooking utensils, electrical wire insulation as well, where it prevents the cables from heating up. The heat insulation is also PFAS. Fluorosurfactants, such as aqueous film forming foam used in firefighting foams for Class B fires, flammable liquids, also contains a lot of PFAS. So the foams that we have in our fire extinguisher, as long as it's labeled there that is good for, usually the typical type is type A, B, C fires, those may contain PFAS. Firefighting training facilities is a potential for PFAS contamination. That's because a lot of firefighting foams are being used. Waste disposal facilities such as landfills and wastewater treatment plants are also a source of PFAS contamination. Okay, this is a brief history of PFAS. PFAS was developed long time ago, back in the 1930s. And since 1940s, it's already being used as non-stick coatings. Initial production, PFOS initial production and PFOA started in the 1940s. Then it was used for stain and water resistant products. You know, at the time we will have raincoats already. Protective clothings, including those worn by firemen, firefighting foams, waterproof fabrics. And then we have PFNA and also fluorothalonous. The initial production started in 1970s. They were used in architectural resins, also firefighting foams. And since 1980s, there has been a huge connection between industries that did not manage well the disposal of PFAS, and it's connected to some human health issues of the community. Okay, and since year 2000, thousands of lawsuits were filed for personal injury claims arising from PFOA leakages and contamination that's related to human health. So after all the lawsuits, litigations, manufacturers are being sued. So what they do is they phase out the production of PFOA and PFOS mainly, and due to health concerns. Okay, and it all started around the turn of the century, which is around 2000. But because it was sort of regulated, or it has heightened alert in the Western countries. So the production of it got shifted to Asia. And the two most talked about the countries with data of PFAS production is China and Japan. So China, the graph below shows since the production stopped in the Western world in 2000, China has picked up gradually and almost double or triple its production through the years up until 2011. Same case happens to Japan. The Japan PFAS situation report published by IPAN in 2019 mentioned that Japan is one of the biggest PFAS manufacturer in the world, and the production amount actually doubled since 1998 until 2017. So in the Western countries, PFAS sources which observe environmental impacts are focused by country are in Europe, United States, Australia, and Canada. So the primary source that PFAS were found were mainly in the manufacturing and production of PFAS, firefighting areas, which is AFFF, aqueous flame forming foams, in airports, military sites, oil and gas industries in Australia as well, power industries, where they use a lot of insulation, transfer stations, fire training areas, airports, militaries as well for Canada, and certain industries like metal plating, finishing. So actually, they are now beginning to have more research that is going into textile industries as well, and also other industries which may not be the source of PFAS, but are using contaminated soil or material in their production. Then they become a receptor of the contaminants. So emerging concerns that are being studied right now are landfill leachate. Landfill leachate, everybody knows that it has a lot of heavy metals. It has a lot of other contaminants, organic contaminants as well. But there has been studies done in Europe that landfill leachate also contains a lot of PFAS, because through the years, a lot of PFAS has been disposed without managing the disposal sites. Biosolids, wastewater treatment and land application. Brownfields, where we have historic fires. Brownfields are contaminated sites where there have been historic fires and a lot of firefighting foams have been used. Also, industries that have ceased operation. We do not know if what kind of chemical they have done or what production they have been doing before. Soil reuse, excess soil management, and air emissions and dust. Okay, now how does PFAS transport? PFAS is highly soluble and it will dissolve and migrate in groundwater. So PFAS movement in aquifer occurs both vertically and horizontally, right? So PFAS in groundwater seepage will seep into surface water like lakes and ponds, and it mostly accumulated in the sediments. Okay, and based on studies conducted in France and USA, PFAS in drinking water can most frequently be found from sources from groundwater compared to surface water. But of course, this cannot be. There's still lack of research. It's still not very comprehensive. And in the case of Indonesia, from my understanding, Jakarta relies heavily on the use of groundwater for their drinking and daily usage purposes. So the use of the occurrence of PFAS in groundwater should be studied in depth, whether it's already appears in the groundwater sources because of especially near industrial sites. Okay, the fate and transport of PFAS. PFAS is highly soluble, okay, and it's non-volatile. It's highly persistent and very low biodegradability. Okay, this is currently being researched as well in US because some scientists, some scientists in Jacobs especially, and with collaboration with some academicians in the University of US, is studying on the potential of natural attenuation of PFAS as well, and whether how fast it attenuates and how can we speed up the attenuation that can help to treat, to remediate it at the site using the natural way. PFAS is also known as forever chemicals. It's part of the dirt. It's not part, it's an addition to the dirty dozen of the POPs because it's stable against hydrolysis, photolysis, acidic and basic reaction, oxidation reactions, and also any kind of chemical reactions. Okay, transportation of PFAS are mostly via groundwater migration. But there has been a number of research of PFAS transport conducted in the lab. But Anderson and his team questions whether the information, the data that we derive from the lab on fate and transport of PFAS, whether it's conclusive and representative of what's happening at the field. Now, where are the regulations go globally? This is very interesting. PFAS is still not regulated at the federal level in the US. They are working on it, and it could be coming out very soon. It's regulated inconsistently across the different states in the US. On other countries, the US, the US at the federal level, the US EPA only call it a health advisory level at the moment. And if it has a very stringent number, almost the same as Netherlands and Australia, which is at 0.07 microgram per liter. Canada is regulated and it has a maximum acceptable concentration of 0.6. UK is also regulated. The rest of them are not regulated. So there's still a lot of room of improvement when it comes to regulation, and without a regulation in place, there will be a lack of enforcement to monitor and to remediate PFAS. Now, how can we assess and mitigate the risk for PFAS? First of all, I want to talk a little bit on why is PFAS being so popular as a contaminant starting around 2000 or 2010. The reason is there is a huge shortage of a very serious shortage of laboratory capabilities to analyze for PFAS. Okay, we know the lawsuits and all that started somewhere in the 1980s, but from then on, PFAS have not been, the labs have not been able to pick up as much as compared to now. So although it's the issue started somewhere in the 80s, it's still lacked of a lot of data cannot be collected or cannot be analyzed. And so the whole process lacks of data until around 2000 and 2010. But throughout the years, a lot of sampling methodology has been developed and a lot of guidance. And those guidance come up with a lot of what we could now call it myth. It has a lot of prohibitions. Some are reasonable. For example, you shouldn't have any Teflon materials and no waterproof clothing, because these may be sources of PFAS that can cross-contaminate our samples. But some is also very absurd, such as we shouldn't wear new clothing. All clothing must be washed at least 3 times. We are not allowed to shower before sampling, and we're also not allowed to use sunblock. But over the years, after we have multiple samplings and multiple data, then this kind of myth has now been thrown out of the window, and those requirements are actually based on urban legend at the time and not on actual data. So the most new guidance documents still look to old guidance documents, and they will perpetuate the prohibitions. Okay, analytical data are now available. Recent papers questioning prohibitions are done by Denley and Rodowa, which is not too long ago, last year. Most materials don't actually have PFAS in them. I mean those in the myth, or have a trivial amount, a very small little amount, but as long as it's not in contact with our sample, then it should be all right. Then overall problem is somewhat overblown when it comes to sampling methodology, and the use of industry standard caution for sampling is what we are adopting right now. How do we do PFAS risk assessment? Typical risk assessment evaluates our chemical of concerns to determine whether it has unacceptable risk may be present to the receptors, right? So if there is, then we will recommend remediation or we mitigate the risk. So the challenges we have is, even now, we still have limited toxicity data coming from PFAS that can tell us how toxic it is to human health. So the uncertainty in toxicity data and the range of assumptions and approaches, it will lead to overly conservative assessment of risk and low risk based cleanup concentrations. Meaning is, because we are unclear, the scientists are still unclear on whether how toxic the material is to human health. Then to be safe, people will adopt the lower range, the lower concentration as a threshold that may affect human, and we may be overly conservative, and we force the stakeholders to remediate when it's not really necessary. So a lot of tests has been done on animals, on lab rats, and also on monkeys. But unfortunately, there is also lack of connection from the reaction the animals develop after exposure to PFAS to how human will react after exposure to PFAS. So there is a need to increase transparency in this kind of tests in the research world, where assessing and interpreting risk to develop range for management options. Okay, the toxicology problem statement. We have potentially thousands of PFAS now. The list is still growing every year. But so far, the most studied is still PFOS and PFOA. We know that they are toxic, but to what extent they are toxic and is still being studied. Okay, hundreds with human exposure potential, and there are also at high dosage. For example, those dealt with the lawsuits previously, exposed to high dosages of PFOS and PFOA, and those have led to a very adverse health effect like cancers and all that. So very few with toxicity that is well studied like PFOS and PFOA, but at the moment, there is still very high potential for PFAS, other substances, the thousands of them, to be studied. Okay, in Jacobs, we have a PFAS risk assessment or management strategy. We provide PFAS risk assessment and management strategies that helps our clients to minimize costs while at the same time protecting human health and also reducing liabilities. So we will go for these types of desired outcomes where it's a higher PFAS risk management and cleanup levels, less aggressive PFAS remedial alternatives, reduce or manage risks and liabilities without active remediation, focus on PFAS, media pathways and the highest risk estimates with the range of PFAS risk management options, and also provide effective risk communication that reflects uncertainties. We always adopt a tiered approach, a fit-for-purpose approach, where we will desired outcome with the client. The risk assessment approach will answer specific stakeholder questions and goals. And also, we will describe the challenges and uncertainties as part of the report deliverable. Okay, PFAS risk assessment, risk management assumes known or suspected to be present. We always need to address public concern immediately and also address the exposure immediately. So monitor only is something that we will only do if it's a very low risk. And we always develop a risk-based approach. Okay, now we come to the PFAS situation in Indonesia. First of all, looking at the bigger picture in Southeast Asia, Thailand has detected PFAS already in drinking water, surface water, tap water, and groundwater. In Malaysia, PFAS was detected in surface water. We couldn't find any literature of PFAS in groundwater yet. Singapore, PFAS detected in surface and coastal waters. Also no literature in groundwater. Vietnam, PFAS is detected in surface water, tap water, and groundwater. In Philippines, PFAS is detected in drinking water, surface water, and coastal water. But again, there's no literature on groundwater. In Indonesia, PFAS is detected in coastal waters and wastewater. Also no literature in groundwater. Okay, the background of PFAS in Indonesia. Indonesia signed the Stockholm Convention in 2001 and ratified it in September 2009. The ratification came into force in December 2009. Both PFOA and PFOAs are also regulated under the Stockholm Convention. So the KLHK had published general information on PFAS on their website. Badan Standarisasi Nasional Indonesia had issued a standard on how to test for PFOA and PFOS in textile for the textile industry. The Ministry of Agriculture of Indonesia now prohibits PFOS to be used in active and additive ingredients for pesticides. by including the PFOS in Annex 2 of the Ministry's decree. The Ministry of Industry includes the obligation to acknowledge PFOS concentration in textile production process for companies to be labeled as green textile industry standards. Hopefully, I think the ministry is hoping that this action will encourage the manufacturers, the textile industry to reduce the use of PFOS. So other governmental agencies such as BPOM, KLHK, BPPT have issued information on several hazardous chemicals related to food products for PFOA, but there is still no monitoring program in place. Okay, for Indonesia, there are only 5 research that we can find in literature. It's published and available to the public. So the first is perfluorinated compounds in human breast milk that is being sampled across several countries in Asia. And that research actually reported that in all breast milk samples collected in all Asian countries studied, which includes Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Cambodia, 100% of the samples collected in Indonesia reported PFOS in it. And for Indonesia, the samples were collected in Jakarta and Purwakarta. Then the second research is the distribution of anti-fouling biocides and perfluoroalkyl compounds in sediments from selected locations in Indonesian coastal waters. The team actually collected samples from Jakarta Bay and also Manado, Bitung, and etc. But unfortunately for PFAS, they only sent the samples they collected from Jakarta Bay for analysis and not for other coastal waters. And from that results, both PFOA and PFOS were detected in the samples from Jakarta Bay, and with PFOS reporting higher concentrations than PFOA. So it's the first indication that PFOA and PFOS is already present in coastal waters of Indonesia. Then the third one is the organic chemical and heavy metal contaminants in wastewater discharge from 2 textile manufacturing facilities in Indonesia. This research was actually done by Greenpeace, and they sampled 2 textile plants in Bandung. And from there, PFOA was detected in one of the facilities, and after the treatment of their wastewater discharge. Then we have the PFAS situation report for Indonesia that is issued by IPAN. This is very interesting because it lists down a lot of the current situation in Indonesia and what are the challenges that's being faced by Indonesia, and also what is recommendation to manage PFAS in Indonesia. And the final one that was published in 2019 is plastic waste flooding Indonesia leads to toxic chemical contamination of the food chain. This research not only focuses on PFAS alone, but also other toxic chemicals, including POPs and also other organic contaminants, and how it can be absorbed into microplastic and from there being released or to cross-contaminate the food chain. So this research actually found PFAS already present in tofu, and also found PFAS in chicken eggs of all the samples being collected around manufacturing plants that actually uses plastic a lot. Okay, how do we treat PFAS? So the conventional way to treat PFAS is carbon sorption. Carbon sorption is physical and chemical process, which one substance become attached to another. Regulated PFAS sorb well to carbon, and some unregulated ones do not. But of course, the toxicity of those unregulated ones are still being studied as well. So ion exchange sorption is also another method that we use. membrane filtration and coagulation. For soil, we do a lot of capping, disposal to permitted landfills. Of course, those with liners and all, and a good management system. Incineration, PFAS soil at temperatures high enough, you can destroy contaminants, which is about more than 1,000 degrees Celsius. It's the highest cost option because, but it's also the easiest to be managed. Stabilization involves mixing waste with binding agents like clays and sometimes also with concrete, dollarcrete to prevent the release of contaminants into the environment. Okay, these are the treatment options that we are still not we as in Jacobs, the market or the academic world is still developing and being tested out. Oxidation, which involves adding chemical reagents either above ground or into subsurface to destroy organic contaminants. There is some evidence of PFAS oxidation, but there's no full-scale pilot tests being done yet. So in situ sequestration, which involve injection of colloidal activated carbon polymers and combinations, but still again no field tests yet. Biotreatment, which also includes using microbial bio-augmentation. From what I know, this is being tested out now in US, but the results are still very preliminary and still not conclusive at the moment. Soil remediation, thermal desorption is a very good way, but it's also a very, very expensive way. Size segregation, soil washing. This has been tested out before on control volume in the lab, but still needs more data from actual pilot testing. Biopiles are ex situ solid waste biological process. This has so far, biopiles has not been very effective in treating PFAS. Okay, in situ residuals treatment summary. In situ thermal, the thermal, it's good if you like what we mentioned earlier, it's good if it can reach 1,000 degrees Celsius. So in situ thermal is still being studied, but still not very effective yet. Injectable AC, commercial preparation of nanoscale activated carbon in a suspension like GAC, absorbs some compounds better than others, limited capacity. Polymer stabilized, a cationic polymer stabilized, packed with improved sorption, like GAC absorbs some compounds better than others. High affinity polymers, and also chemical oxidation. The residual PFAS usually is being incinerated, or we use cold plasma and hydrothermal, which oxidizes concentrated PFAS in water using high energy processes, including reactive plasma, high pressure and temperature coupled with high pH. Jacobs are still researching all this at the moment. Unfortunately, still not available in the market. So in Jacobs, we have spent more than 10 years supporting over hundreds of PFAS projects worldwide. We have completed over 100 million of PFAS work in the last 5 years. So we are the leading industry in characterization and remediation, in sampling protocols, field screenings, forensic methods, water remediation, soil remediation, groundwater remediation. We are also partnering with a lot of universities in the United States by advancing PFAS science through academic research. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for today. Any questions to you, Ankita?
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, thanks. It's really interesting PFAS facts and information that we got a moment ago. So before we're heading to the real Q&A sessions, I would like to ask the warm-up questions like, since how stable PFAS in the groundwater or in the soil? In your opinion, what is the best remediations methodology to resolve PFAS contamination in the soil or in the groundwater?
methodology to remove PFAS. If it's not being released yet, then activated carbon is the best way to remove it, especially in the wastewater stream. But if it's already in the ground, so far thermal has been the most effective if cost allows. Otherwise, then we have to go back to some of the most conventional way. Soil washing is one of them. Groundwater, it's still being pump and treat is still one of the options that we are looking into.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really insightful. And okay, looks like we open the Q&A sessions now on, and we have a lot of questions here in the chat box. Okay, let me read them first. The first question is from Pak Thomas Purtranto. Pak Thomas, he is a lecturer from Diponegoro University. He was asking that which kind of aquifer can be affected by PFAS, and is it uncombined or combined? And beside of natural conditions, is there any human activities affected by PFAS in the groundwater?
Sorry, Angita, I lost you.
Oh, okay. Okay, Pak Thomas from Diponegoro University was asking which kind of aquifer can be affected by PFAS, and beside the natural conditions, is there any human activities can affect the PFAS in the groundwater?
Okay, most of the time, it's the shallow aquifer or the unconfined aquifer, because PFAS is light and it's mobile, so most of the time we can find it in the unconfined aquifer. But there are also times we found it in the confined aquifer. If the aquitart is leaky or there is some penetration, then it does leak into the confined aquifer as well. And the next question is beside natural condition, is there any human activities affected PFAS in groundwater? Yes and no, because in many countries, a lot of drinking water was sourced from groundwater, and there are a lot of times that it's not treated prior to use. That is the time when PFAS is also being consumed, and that in drinking, we call it the potable use, is one of the major what do you call it, a major way for PFAS to enter human body. But of course, PFAS is also already found in a lot of livers of aquatic products such as fish as well. And it's also it's in the liver of fishes. So as long as we don't consume livers of fishes, but there's still insufficient research to show whether PFAS is still being transported from, being transferred from aquatic marine life to human.
Okay. So we also have a questions from ITB. With so many consumers products having PFAS at the same level, do such a consumer product industries aware about this?
Yes, they are aware. If you can, I've done a quick search on Shopee, and quite a number of suppliers that's selling what do you call it, frying pans, are now writing in their advertisement that this is PFOA free, So in terms of PFOA, yes, but are there still industries that are still using it? Yes, as well, because it's still not being tightly managed or regulated in many countries in Asia. And also, when it comes to firefighting foams for fire extinguishers, a lot of major producers are already removing PFAS from it, but there are also minor, smaller production companies.
Okay, I'm sorry, Tang, I lost you a moment ago.
Sorry, Angita.
I was lost you a moment ago.
Okay.
I thought my internet was bad today. Okay. We have another questions from Khalif from ITV. He was asking that what about the health sides of human or animals that consume food or drinks that contain by PFAS? Does it have any health side effect?
Okay. The only data that is published is related to animals. And yes, they develop a very bad human effects. No, sorry, very bad health effects, which is develop cancers, like as what was mentioned earlier, those testicular cancers, colon cancers, all those are a result of exposure to PFAS. But it's only in animals. And for the human side, the effects of PFAS on human health is still inconclusive. They're still short of a lot of data.
Okay. And okay, let's move on to the next questions. This question's from Fikri, and he was asking, does washing or cooking remove PFAS from foods? Is there any special way to remove it? And how do we identify PFAS in our groundwater at home? By it can be visible by naked eye or sensing it by a odor or something.
Okay, I'll answer one by one. Does washing or cooking remove PFAS from food? No, it doesn't, which is why we call it a forever chemical, because it's just got transferred from one place to another, from the source to groundwater to surface water to sediments to the fish and then to human. So it's forever there. And it's also why one of the research actually mentioned that they found PFAS in human breast milk, because it's not easily removed. And special way to remove it when it's in our food? No, there's still no conclusive. There's still no research being done on how we can remove PFAS from food. So how do we identify PFAS in groundwater at home? By naked eye or by sensing it in daily practice? There's no way to do that. The only way to find out about PFAS in groundwater is to sample it and send it to the lab to test it, which is why drinking directly from groundwater, especially close to industrial areas or any potential sources, has higher risk, and especially if you drink directly from groundwater without prior treatment. Wherever possible, and you have a municipal water supply that's treated, then that would be more reliable.
Okay. So actually, we're out of the questions in the chat box. If you want to have more questions, you please unmute yourself and you can ask directly to Pak Tang, and we will have a really great discussions. Seems like we still have time, so please raise your hand or unmute yourself and directly ask.
Yeah, Anggita, excuse
Yes.
me.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Pak.
Would like to tell Pak Tang that your presentation is in my Zoom background. Yeah, you can
Amazing,
download
Pak.
it. I've uploaded on the chat box. Okay.
Thank you, Pak.
Okay. Is there any questions that you want to ask? Oh, okay. We have one of the questions from Debbie. Hi, Tang. You mentioned that carbon absorption is used for a treatment for PFAS. Is that both in remediations and at water treatment plants?
Okay. Hi, Debbie. Mostly it's only in remediation. Water treatment plants seldom use carbon absorption for PFAS removal. Granulated activated carbon is still the preferred way for PFAS removal in treatment plants.
Okay. Okay, is there any questions from all the audience? You can ask directly and unmute yourself, please. Oh, we have another question in the chat box. Okay. based in your experience research so far, is there any correlations of the PFAS for the contaminated specific locations such a rural or urban area?
Okay. So far, industrial areas are the highest risk with as a source, and also airports, firefighting training grounds, and we are now studying about landfill sites and see if leachate has them or not, and also for line landfill, those not those disposal sites, those proper sanitary landfills, whether those will have PFAS or not. So urban areas will have less risk unless the PFAS containing waste or PFAS waste are being disposed at urban areas, rural areas. Then rural areas should have less waste, less risk. Welcome.
Okay, is there any questions, please?
Yeah, I would like to ask another question. So, Pak Tang, with the severeness of the effect of this PFAS, is it expensive to test water sample to detect PFAS?
Okay. This is one of the major challenge for Indonesia as well. So far, lab testing in Indonesia can only be done by private laboratories in most Asian countries, Malaysia as well. And but unfortunately, even though it's in a private laboratory, most of the samples will need to be sent overseas. So for the case of Indonesia, it will be sent either to Australia or Singapore, and that drives the costs up a lot. So what we are trying to do, and we also had a lot of challenges doing that, is we tried to set up our own laboratory in the university to do that, and it needs a triple quadruple LCMS to test it, but of course, you still need to get a lot of standards and all to do that.
Thank you, Pak.
Welcome.
Oh, is there any questions for from the audience?
I think we have one in the chat. Does Jacobs have specific technology for remediate PFAS in soil and groundwater? Yes, it's not specific, but it depends on the condition and the situation. So a lot of background studies we need to do to characterize the aquifer, to see how far it has gone, whether we are containing it or we want to treat it or we want to pull it back. So there's no specific technology, but what was mentioned just now, such as absorption, thermal, those are the different types of technologies that we have applied so far. And the next question is there any bacteria or fungi detected that can act as bioabsorption for PFAS? This is being studied at the moment. I don't have the information with me yet because it's still being pilot tested somewhere in Europe and in US. There's no information released at the moment, so I'm not sure about that. But it should be one of the focus for remediation of PFAS moving forward. So I encourage the scientists and researchers in Asia to look into this as well.
Okay, okay, everybody, let's have another questions, please. Okay, if I have a questions for you again, Pak Tang. If a groundwater contaminated by PFAS in aquifer, does it get accumulated in the certain lithology? Like, is it can get accumulated in the unconfined layer or somewhere? How PFAS behaves in the groundwater specifically?
It's usually in unconfined layer, but in confined layer, that's we find it sometimes as well. It's highly mobile, so it doesn't stick to one place. So it keeps transporting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another questions from Pak Rusmawan from ITV. Is there any success story have done in Indonesia before applying some of the remediations method, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah.
No, there has not been any remediation for PFAS done yet in Indonesia. There is actually another question before that.
Oh, yes.
What instrument can detect PFAS in the body of soil and water, and price? Okay, there's no instrument. Sorry, there's no in situ handheld portable equipment that we can use to test PFAS in soil, water, and all. So we still need to install a monitoring well and collect the groundwater sample and send it to the lab.
Okay. Okay, looks like we have another question here from Robbie. Pak Tang, you mentioned regarding the bioremediations, then how far the natural attenuation can reduce the contamination of PFAS in the soil and groundwater at the moment, and how can we state that the area need to be remediated?
Okay, very good question. I'll answer the last question first. How can we state the area need to be remediated? So because in a lot of Asian countries, it's not really regulated and it doesn't have a health threshold, in terms of concentrations where it will affect human health. So if we adopt what the developed countries have, if you look at US EPA, it's 0.07 microgram per liter, and then if you exceed that, or when you reach that concentration, then you have to do something. But especially so looking at the risk-based approach, that will sort of tell us what actions need to be done next. So for example, if you find 0.07 in the case of Africa, if you find 0.07 microgram per liter of PFAS in groundwater, and the groundwater is being consumed and being extracted for drinking use, then it will be the highest risk, and that is when we will, I think the first thing is not to remediate, the first thing is to stop people from drinking it, and then we move into remediation. That is when we have to move into recommend remediation. And then the other question you have is natural attenuation. Yes, based on the data that we have at the moment, natural attenuation is very low. Biodegradability is also very low, which is why it's called a forever chemical. And but it does happen slowly. So pilot tests being done in research at the moment is trying to speed it up by I do not know what the research is about, but the research is about speeding up the biodegradability of it, and see if that works and can be used as one of the remediation technology.
Okay. We have another questions from Debbie. For people interested in working to remove PFAS from environment, what courses or subjects in school that you recommend that people can study? And to follow on, how did you get interested? Oh yeah, how did you get interested in studying PFAS, Pak Tang?
Okay. The first question, of course, to study geology, my background and also a lot of backgrounds of, of the participants here. Also to study environmental science, that will be the major courses that I would recommend. And the next question, why am I interested in studying PFAS? Okay, PFAS is one of the emerging contaminants, just like any other POPs. But PFAS is too common in our daily lives compared to pesticides. We don't have pesticides in our kitchen. We don't have PBBs, polybiphenyls in our kitchens, but we have PFAS in our kitchen, and we have been eating from that PFAS pan for probably the last 10, 20 years without knowing what it can do to us one day. So I feel the need, I feel the probably the need to create awareness in Asia, because the issue has been boiling in Europe and US for the last since 1980s until now. But in Asia, the awareness is still very low. And then when it comes to countries besides Malaysia and Singapore, a lot of Asian countries still relying on groundwater as their main potable source, and still a lot of unknown as to what's in the groundwater. And PFAS is definitely one of the new contaminants that is probably affecting everyone's lives without knowing it.
Okay, people, I really encourage you to unmute yourself to ask Pat Tang directly. Don't be shy.
You have another question?
Okay. From Jocelyn, do PFAS also transport in air? If it does it impact our atmosphere?
Okay, there's conflicting research on this. PFAS, most of PFAS compounds are not volatile, so it shouldn't be in air. But there are also instances where samples collected from rainwater has PFAS.
Yes.
So it doesn't make sense for PFAS to evaporate up into the air. So rainwater must have dissolved it on the way down. So whether PFAS is really in the air, we have yet to know.
Okay. Okay. I have another questions. Okay, my question is, how long in average to remediate PFAS, and comparing to the other contaminants like hydrocarbon, like usually that we can remediate hydrocarbons within 2 or 5 years, but how long we have to tackle the PFAS in the groundwater comparing to other substances?
Yep. Depending on the situation and how far the contamination, how widespread the contamination is. In average, it will take about 3-5 years as well, but there are also cases where it extends to over 10 years.
Okay. We have another questions from ITV. Oh no, it's not a questions. It's other informations.
I just found the article about PFAS in the rainwater in US.
Yeah.
Yes.
Give the link here.
Okay, everyone, you can unmute yourself and ask directly. Okay, there is a question from.
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, there's one question's just come up from Masa. Hi, Tang, for the remediation actions in the both soil and groundwater, which is the most difficult to remediate by ruling out of mobility in the PFAS in the groundwater?
The most difficult to remediate by ruling out the mobility, I would say groundwater. It's more challenging. Soil is very much in situ. So if we can remove the soil and then we can treat it, remediate it after that, then it's easier to be managed. Whereas it's PFAS is very mobile in groundwater, so containing it is a problem. Preventing it from migrating is another problem. And while we have to do that while we are remediating it, so that's quite challenging.
Okay, we have another questions from Pak Fajar Rubis, just come up from YouTube Streamline. And the question was, how much PFAS cost estimations from the groundwater remediations in Indonesia? And for example case, one of the groundwater basin.
It's very difficult to estimate a cost, but in general, it's very expensive. Will cost in hundreds of thousands of US dollars to millions of US dollars. It depends heavily on how widespread the contamination is, and also whether which aquifer we need to remediate. You know, of course, the shallow being cheaper, and if you go very deep into confined, then it will be more expensive.
Okay. Is there any question? But oh, there's someone raised his hand. Who's that? I don't know. Can I don't know how to see it and how unmute them. Oh, Jesslyn asked to unmute. Go ahead, Jesslyn.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kak Anggita. Hi, Pak Tang. I would like to ask, as far as I know, most remediations are focused on groundwater remediation. And before you just mentioned that it is harder to remediate on groundwater. I'm quite curious, why not we just focus on remediate the soil first? Because from what I've read, most PFAS are still in our soil and it moves slower before reaching groundwater.
Okay. Yes. First of all, it depends on how deep your aquifer is. Okay. If your groundwater level is very low, very shallow, then when there's a leak or anything, or there's a release, then PFAS will already be in your groundwater and it start migrating already because it's very mobile. Then, of course, removing the soil is easy, but to capture the contaminants in groundwater, it's going to be it's challenging. Okay, it's not impossible, it's just challenging, because the first thing you have to do is you have to stop the migration. And when you stop the migration, then you can start remediating whatever you have in your being contained. But if your water level, if your aquifer is very deep, then, and it takes time for the contaminants to infiltrate through soil before reaching your groundwater, then yes, you're right. Excavating the soil and treating the soil will be the best option, and probably the easiest option. Does that answer your question, Jessie?
Yeah. Thank you for the answer, Pak Tang.
Welcome.
Okay, is there anyone to want to ask Pak Tan directly? Please raise your hand, please.
While you're asking questions, can you also scan the QR code and provide a feedback on my presentation? It just has a few questions to answer in there. Won't take more than a minute.
Oh, yes. Yes, please, for everybody to scan the QR code right here. Okay, is there anyone to want to ask or discuss about the PFAS? It's really interesting, and so far that we know that PFAS is more likely stable in really low natural attenuations, is stable for oxidations also, and they are in everywhere, even in our kitchen. So anyone who want to ask another questions or have a really great discussion with Pak Tang, or anyone have inquiries that how to start the research, PFAS research probably, please.
Got one more question.
Okay.
Aside from PFAS, what are the other emerging contaminants that we need to be aware of? And some are that are probably, can you share some that are probably more relevant for us in Asia?
Actually, for emerging contaminants, there's quite a bit of it. PBBs is one of them. We always talk about polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, but polybrominated biphenyls is one of the emerging contaminants as well. And most of the contaminant under POPs, considered as POPs, heptachlor, the pesticides, the OCPs, OPPs, they are all emerging contaminants and also very persistent. So those are the types of contamination that we should also be focusing in Asia more. It's most of them are already being regulated by developed countries, but it's Asia that we should be more aware and focus and do more research and see how it affects the Asian countries.
Thank you. As a follow-on, do you have any insight on where is funding typically coming from in terms of research? Like what makes this a little difficult is it's definitely emerging contaminants, and a lot of research should back this up. Would you have any insight on where funding from research is coming from? Is it from private companies, the government, academia, and such?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part? I'm lost at it. I did.
It might be my connection. So I just wanted to find out if you have any insights on where funding in terms of research on these emerging contaminants are coming from. Is it typically from private institutions, from the government, the academe, or development assistance grants?
Okay, it should be a combination. Fundings. There are a lot of fundings coming from developed countries as well. I know I have personally applied from the US and also from Japan. But I know European countries are also providing a lot of grants for research in Asia. So besides that, local government should also have their own fundings to do this kind of research. Yeah. The funding should come from governmental and non-governmental organizations at the same time.
And we observe that they are now coming from those both private, public, and government arm. Do we see that in Asia?
Yes, we see that in Asia. In Asia, mostly will be from governments, but the private fundings will come from countries outside Asia, from my experience. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Hi, Tang. A similar question about regulations. You mentioned that different states, different countries have different regulations on the use of PFAS and then the remediation of it and the limits. Do you see any trends, any certain countries that you think will be next, or like what do you foresee? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but if you did, where would you predict the regulations are going to start coming in stronger? Like what geographies or locations?
Okay, it's definitely going to be Europe and US and Canada, and then if for Asia, I'm thinking Singapore. It's leading in terms of developing what do you call it, a guideline or a regulation for it. Followed, besides Unfortunately, besides Singapore, I don't think I can see any potential of it being regulated in any Asian countries yet. Japan probably will. Japan, South Korea, China may be next as well. There's a huge amount of research on PFAS done in China. The list is very long, and followed by Japan and South Korea. So I believe these three countries in Greater Asia and Singapore in Southeast Asia will be leading to regulate it.
Hopefully that's answer your questions, Debbie.
Hi, Tang.
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to know whether this PFAS can be transformed, like most of the contaminants, when they are transformed to other forms, they become less harmful. So just like heavy metals, maybe some of them, when they are oxidized or reduced, they become less harmful to the environment. So what about this PFAS? Do they have such kind of properties also?
Okay. Thank you. It's so far there's no evidence that it will transform. So the evidence that we have so far, it will be transferred as it is from one entity to another entity, and that which is why its toxicity remains, and it likes to combine. It has very high affinity in humans, especially. It has very high affinity to our serum albumin, which means it will stick to our blood cells, and it will stay there, and it will not transform.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Is there any questions, everyone? Okay, seems like we out of questions, Pak Tang, and thank you so much for your presentations. And I would like to have announcement since a lot of Indonesian hydrogeologists is here. We have announcements from the PAAI, or Indonesian Hydrogeologists of Associations. We will have the 5th PIT PAAI soon on October at 26th and 27th, and also the 28th in 2020. And the PIT PAAI will goes virtually. And please, I will send you the poster on the chat box, and you can scan the QR code right there to register yourself on the 5th PAAI on October. So yes, do you have any last okay, okay, seems like Pak Rusmawan already send it into the chat box. Okay, thank you, Pak. Yes, do you have any last
I'm sorry, Achi, I lost you.
Oh
Did
yes.
you ask me a question? Sorry.
No. Not.
Okay.
Do you okay, Pak Erwin, do you have any questions or last regards for this event?
Yeah, thank you, Aci. Before Pak Tang mention his take-home message, I would like to say that groundwater and hydrogeology is still, it's also new emerging sciences that we have to take care of, that we have to study more of it, because obviously we don't know anything right now. More of the unknowns is coming in. So hydrogeology is still the way to go for the undergrad students in the attendance list. Thank you, Aceh.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you so much, Pa. I think we're good for now. Once again, a huge thank you for everybody who attend and coming to this event, and huge thank you to ITB for organizing it. And it was a really pleasure to have this event with you all. And thank you so much, Pak Tang, for to be our speaker today.
Thank you.
So, okay, that's all, everybody. I hope we will see you in the next event, probably. Okay.
Pak Tang, could you stop your screen sharing? We need to take a
Sure.
photograph. Thank you. Okay, I will take the photograph. Wait, I will remove all the spotlight. Yeah. Okay, and then gallery. Wait, gallery. Everyone who is would like to show the profile picture, you could open your screen and camera.
Open your camera, please. Don't be shy, everybody.
Okay. Wait. Okay, more is. Okay, I think that's all. Yeah, I will take. This is one. And this is two. Yeah. Okay, that's all. And I would also remind the attendants to visit website of groundwater program study. I would like to write another blog post about this presentation just to sum up the presentation from Pak Tang. Hopefully it will help you to understand the substance more. Ya. Terima
Thank you,
kasih, Pak Tang.
Terima kasih,
Sampai jumpa
Pak.
di tempat lain.
Have a good
Ya,
weekend.
mohon kalau slide-nya sudah aman bisa dikirim ke Aci, nanti kami upload. Ya.
Bisa, Pak.
Saya akan end event. Terima kasih semua sudah hadir.
Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih semua.
Terima kasih. Ya, Pak.
Terima kasih Pak Erwin, terima kasih Pak Tang. Have a great weekend.